Okay, we are good to go. Welcome, everybody, to the Holiday Perspective Pep Talk. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Andrew Wade. I am the CEO and founder of Case Specific Nutrition. We just turned 10 this year, which is a pretty crazy thing to say out loud. I am a dietitian by trade, just like all of the other amazing practitioners that many of you likely interact and engage with. And as I shift more and more to the mentoring role, I get to do really, really fun stuff like speak and do these types of sessions. Devin, is this the third perspective type pep talk you and I have done with the holidays? I think, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
Maybe.
and it's something different every year. I don't repeat the same info. It's meant to be a fresh take, and there's some go-to heavy hitters, but for the most part, this is meant to be an original view and reflection. Um, this is a really really fun chat for me. It's one of my favorite times of year to chat with people, just because this is a time of season that is meant to be such a positive thing. And once again, 10 years in, 10,000 clients seen and counting. And all I can continue to see and notice is that this time of year is plagued by stress and frustration and worry and burnout, more so than it should be. And so, some of the goals I have for you this evening are to offer you some new perspectives. That can be relating to food, that can be relating to the holidays themselves, the time of year. There's some different things I'll throw at you, but my hope is that I shake up your brain a little bit and give you a chance to go into these next 6 weeks feeling a little bit more at ease, a little bit curious, a little bit more excited, and hopefully on the other side of it, a little bit relaxed. I do want to make sure I pause before we dig in, because this year we are getting to do something a little bit different, which is, as always, this is a free talk. That's why you're here. No cost required, no paid entry. But for those of you that don't know, one of the things we have done as a company this year is we actually started a nonprofit organization. It actually went live in the beginning of 2022. But it takes a little while to get executive directors and secretaries and treasurers and get our act together. And so if you have not heard yet, we work alongside, it is not actually under Case Specific, a private foundation by the name of the Chronic Disease Health Alliance. Vince Rinaldi, who is the head of our meal prep company and is also the head of, he's the director of community impact for Case Specific, is the executive director of it. And it is meant to be an arm of really care in the Allegheny County region, tasked with the vision of bridging the gap in access and education to low income communities in the Allegheny County area. And so, long story short, most people don't realize, but chronic disease, heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and even obesity, the incidence, the prevalence of those are massive in the low income communities compared to higher income communities. It's one of the biggest demographic shifts we see. We live in a world, in a country, I should say, that um, we don't really see caloric malnutrition anymore. We see a lot of micronutrient deficiencies. We see a lot of inflammation. We see a lot of body illness. But calorie deficiency isn't a big thing. The lower income populations have a tendency to actually consume more calories just because of the types of foods they have access to. What that means is that there's higher rates of chronic disease, but there's also lower access to education. Within Case Specific Nutrition, right, we are covered by insurance, which is a wonderful thing. Most of our patients do not pay to see us or pay very little to see us. But what's worth noting is even having health insurance is somewhat of a privilege, right? And so there are a lot of people that don't have high quality insurance or do not have high quality employment that gives them access to medical practitioners through that means. Um, and so Vince and I have watched our attempts to care and help people over the years continue to trickle up, so to speak, right? The more money someone makes, the more easy it is to help them. And that is a challenge that we want to accept. And so one of our visions has been what we call the Robin Hood, which is how do we find ways to give back? And some of the things we've done within Case Specific is we are the only practitioner group in the area that actually covers Medicaid and accepts Medicaid. Right now, Medicaid we lose money every time we see a patient with Medicaid, unfortunately. It is really poorly funded, and we don't need to dig into the political rabbit hole that makes that a reality. But we do things internally to dilute that and make sure that we're able to stay afloat as a company and an entity, because these people need help and need care. We want to be able to meet all people where they are. And so, without getting too verbose, we started the Chronic Disease Health Alliance. It is a private foundation that Case Specific contributes money to. We actually have interns and other professionals that are helping us with grant funding. We actually have an alliance of practitioners. So in addition to Case Specific dietitians, we have chefs, we have physicians, we have physical therapists, we have therapists, we have pharmacologists. We have a whole host of practitioners. And the vision of Chronic Disease Health Alliance is to provide scholarships to those that do not have access to care. And so if someone needs to see a dietitian for diabetes, but doesn't have insurance that covers it and cannot afford the cost, we want to be able to offer scholarships for them to come and see us 3 times so that they can get that foot forward, they can go forward. If there's a family that has low access to food because they're in a food desert, which is insanely common in Pittsburgh. Devin, I don't know if you remember that statistic off the cuff, but if you want to state that really quick, that one floored me when you shared that with me.
Oh, I think it's something like 1 in 5 Pittsburgh residents are food insecure because living in a food desert or not having access to enough food.
Yeah, and a food desert is basically a location-based restriction, and we are the city of bridges and tunnels, and so it makes it hard to get food unless you have a car, and a lot of people don't have cars, unfortunately, right? And so we recognize if there are families that have low access to food, we want to be able to provide them with meals. We want to be able to provide them with a practitioner from the direct care physicians of Pittsburgh that's going to spend an hour with them for their hormonal imbalance instead of 5 minutes with them and dismiss them. And so the vision of the CDHA is to help people who want the help, need the help, deserve the help, but can't afford the help. And so one of the things we ask from you is, I'm actually going to drop the link in this chat, and it's also all over our Instagram and social media. It's in the Eventbrite. If you have the ability to donate $1, $5, $50,000, whatever it is, it's to say, please do, please join us. We're calling it our Spread the Health campaign. We've been collecting donations this month. It's really the first external donations we've asked for. Like I said, on the other end, we're doing grant funding. We're working with a lot of other groups and nonprofits, and the hope is that we can use these funds to do some really, really great things in the Pittsburgh area. So we appreciate any participation you can be a part of, and also keep an eye out. Just as a spoiler, next week our Giving Tuesday goes up through November 28th, so we're 12 days away from the end, and I'm going to be doing some other things in the world of giving back and donations. So keep an eye on my Instagram if you haven't in the week ahead, because we have some fun stuff coming. So enough of the soapbox stuff. Devin, did you actually post that link? Did I see that?
Yes, I did.
You are the best. Thank you. Making my life so much easier. It's why they pay you the big bucks. So without further ado, I want to dig into the reason you're all here. So let's dig in. Once again, I call this the Holiday Perspective Pep Talk. Devin and I over the years have decided how inflammatory we need our marketing language to be. All of you have clicked on videos with language of, the last time you'll ever eat chicken. And it's like, oh my gosh, what's happening, right? So I'm very anti-fear mongering. I also don't feel the need to pander to this being like a weight loss type focus. Thank you, Devin. But the goal of the pep talk tonight is really to give you guys some perspectives as we enter this holiday season. As I was sort of alluding to, one of the things I've noticed 10 years in practice is that most people go into the holiday season, which is meant to be a time of time off work, time with friends, time with family, time for gratitude, time for reflection. And by the end of it, they're absolutely drained and burnt out and need a vacation. And we start to look at that and go, wait, what is happening? Why is this becoming a time of year that most of us take this big inhale, because it's like, okay, here we go. And it's like, that's completely missing the point. When we're taking a time of season that's meant to be rejuvenating and it's more of a burnout than any other time of year, something's got to give. And so I want to share some thoughts with you. But right out of the gates, I think one of the things that happens is what I like to call the blur, which is that there's just so many things that happen, right? We are now a week from Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is basically 30 days until Christmas Eve. And then we have New Year's right around the corner there. most people don't realize that between Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve every year, I sit down with clients during sessions and you get these, you ask the question. So like, what do we have coming up in the month of December? It's like, well, after Thanksgiving, it's, pretty clear. And then, I've got, Christmas Eve and, we'll have some stuff that week, but nothing too crazy. And then I'll see them in January and they'll go, man, December was just intense. It was like we had a cookie baking party and I had a Friendsgiving and then we had a friend's Christmas party and then we had a work Christmas party and then we had this thing and then we had this thing. And you just kind of laugh because you look back and realize that, wow, there's a lot going on in the month of December. I personally, my birthday is in December and so is my dad's. And so my entire life, it was Thanksgiving, his birthday, my birthday, family Christmas, actual Christmas, New Year's. And it just always would just blur by. And so I know not just professionally, but personally, I can relate to the blur that happens. And the hope is that we can use some of the strategies today to slow it down a little bit, think about it, take it in stride, actually enjoy it. And then also, I want to make sure we kind of lean into some of those events and make sure we really capture them. Because all of these events are what I like to call exceptions, right? They're things that don't happen that often. They are things that are unique to this time of year. And that means they're supposed to be special. They're not supposed to look like our normal, routine Monday through Friday, 250 days a year. They're meant to really look unique. And because there's a lot of them in sort of one 6-week span, a lot of times we get a little bit burnt out by that. But it's to say, more importantly, I think we blur them together. They tend to blur. And there's a very important comment there, because if we actually take a step back and just for a moment, we think from Thanksgiving to New Year's, it is about 5 weeks. So it's approximately 35 days. And we know there's Thanksgiving. We know there's Christmas Eve and Christmas. And if you celebrate Hanukkah, there's the various celebrations for Hanukkah or Kwanzaa. We have New Year's Eve. Most people have some sort of work event and some sort of fun friends event. And like I said, we'll toss in just for fun a cookie baking celebration. And if you're crazy like me, toss in a birthday. Well, that's 7. So we're saying that even at max capacity, it's 7 of 35 days. And oh yeah, Tara, good. I love that. Another December birthday. And so what we want to think about is there's 7 of 35 days that are special occasions. That means there's 28 days that are just days, right? Just a Tuesday in the middle of December, just a Thursday in the middle of December. And when we fall for the blur, what ends up happening is we string together those 7 days and we treat them like they're all 35 of them. And so what you start to notice is your natural day-to-day routines and habits start to get thrown off because you're connecting a Saturday to the next Saturday, which for some reason means Monday and through Friday need to look completely different. And so one of the things I like to encourage people to do is actually take a second and look at your calendars, right? Do it tonight or do it this weekend. Look ahead, identify the fun events, count them out, and then recognize that those events do not have to set the tone for the majority of the days that exist for the rest of the year. They are allowed to be the exception. They're allowed to be the things you look forward to. Where this becomes so valuable and where I can give you the most acute example is Thanksgiving. As a dietitian, everyone probably assumes that I'm going to, give calorie restricting advice on Thanksgiving and strategies on how to make your candied yams taste like candy with less calories and all that BS. That's absolutely a distraction and a waste of time, in my opinion. What I'd rather point your attention to is that one big day of eating, right? One caloric just slugfest actually has a metabolic advantage. It spikes your leptin, which is a hormone that makes your metabolism go up, and your body just burns. Now, do you hold some water in the form of carbohydrates and fluid in your tissue? Sure. Do you feel bloated? Yeah. Is your intestine, which is a 72-foot long hose, does it get full and you feel swollen? Sure. All those things are true. None of that is long term. Those are all temporary symptoms. Where we go wrong in the Thanksgiving world is you have this fun day of Thanksgiving, and then you eat the leftovers on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in the same portion as you did on Thanksgiving, right? You pile up lunch and dinner for 3 days after that are these mounds of 17 different dishes. And so Thanksgiving part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, part 7, right? That is really where we go from being full to spilled over to sick. And so what ends up happening is if we recognize that, oh, I can enjoy my Thanksgiving, eat what I'm going to eat, do what I'm going to do, have my fun. But then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, what if we treated leftovers like normal meals? What if What if stuffing was just rice or potato, right? What if mashed potatoes was just a starch or a side? I like to say to people that turkey, green beans, and stuffing is chicken, rice, and broccoli if you portion it right. Whether you're rotating your stuffing or your mashed potatoes or your corn or your candied yams or whatever carbohydrate of choice you have around the holidays with a protein and a vegetable, those can just be meals and they can be great leftovers, and you can eat them all week long for all I care. We have this inner narrative, a lot of people do, that Thanksgiving food is unhealthy. And there's that this or that mindset that exists within our culture is, oh, Thanksgiving is this gluttonous fest, which means everything associated with it is gluttonous. And well, no, that's not true. Thanksgiving is a unique celebration where you eat a whole bunch of food, come together with family and friends and loved ones. You get to try everybody's stuff. That event on itself, not an issue. When it drags a week long and becomes this, again, it becomes almost like an eating competition, that's where we struggle. And so that's an example of the blur, right? Where all of a sudden Thanksgiving Day turns into Thanksgiving week. And if it was just a day, it would have been just a day. But when it's a week, now it starts to really feel like it's actually trending towards something. That is where our cookie baking Saturday with family can turn into randomly eating the cookies and candies that are in the work break room, right? So all of a sudden you find yourself eating some cookies on a Saturday, and then randomly Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're munching on cookies that don't even taste that good. Once again, we can see where the blur happens. All of a sudden, we have 5 weeks of massive portions, random desserts, and all sorts of extras. And we then try and say that these individual things are bad. And the thing I always like to draw people's attention to, it's not what you're eating, it's how you're eating it. There's a very big difference between having a cookie or two with a meal and having 4 cookies or 6 cookies at 3 in the afternoon when you're mentally burnt out. One of those things is a dessert and it's a part of an overall event. The other thing is a mindless coping mechanism in the middle of a workday. Those are not the same thing, and we can't pretend that the cookie is the villain in that equation, right? It is a victim of circumstance. And so when we start to think about this, we can actually start to embrace exceptions, start to get actually really excited about the things that are to come. And I encourage each of you to get very clear on what you're excited about. For example, it's really easy if I ask, what's the thing you're most excited about during the holiday season to eat? A lot of people are going to say the cookies. Okay, well, what cookies? Because it's not just cookies, it's specific cookies. And I know that because you're a human being and that's how we operate. It's going to be Aunt Martha's peanut butter blossoms, or it's going to be your mom's sugar cookies. It's going to be a specific cookie or a couple different specific desserts. Get clear on that, because what ends up happening is if you get clear on what I like to call your highlight reel, the things you're most excited about, you're going to emphatically say yes to those things, and you're going to pass on other things as just a natural side effect. I call this being a cookie snob. If you know, if you tell yourself as an inner narrative, I just love cookies around the holidays, you're going to start saying yes to every cookie that comes your way, even the freaking Eaton Park wrapped cookie. And I know there's probably one person in here that's like, I love the Eaton Park cookie. Sorry, didn't mean to offend you, but by comparison, right? We can all agree that there's something fresh baked and different about the holiday season. So something to think about is, if you know the specific cookies you like, instead of not know, right? If you just say cookies are what I like to eat, you're going to say yes to all the cookies. And that's not just going to exist on the special occasions, right? If you say, oh, I'm really looking forward to these specific cookies, this event, now all of a sudden you actually have good clarity on what you're going to get excited about. Matt, are you? No, Matt, you're the Eaton Park cookie guy. I should have known. Oh, I love it. We're going to talk about that another day, my friend. But it's to say that if you have good clarity of these events, right, what's going to take place is you're going to say yes to those emphatically, and you're going to find yourself passing on things that are not as exciting. Where this helps is, one, you actually start to become what I like to call a little bit of a cookie snob, which is you start to recognize that, like, oh, I really like certain things. And so I'm going to say yes to those, which means I'm going to look forward to them and I'm going to enjoy them more, which means they're actually going to be worthwhile to me. And because I enjoyed them so much, it's going to be a lot easier to pass on the stuff that isn't that. And me being able to pass on these things makes me feel like I'm driving and makes me feel like I'm actually, quote unquote, in control, right? And it doesn't have to come from this restrictive place. It can come from just a place of clarity. For me personally, I was, when I was filibustering before we pressed record, I mentioned that one of the few times you'll catch me baking is for my great grandmother's pumpkin pie recipe. It is one of my favorite things. It's one of the few desserts I will absolutely go out of my way to eat. Not all pumpkin pie, my great grandmother's pumpkin pie recipe. So if you see me at a party and there's just random pumpkin pie there, pass. It's not even on my radar. Great grandmother's pumpkin pie recipe is really different. My wife and I have had a tradition that I actually started in high school that we joined in on together in college. It's called pumpkin pie and protein shakes. We actually make pumpkin pies the day before Thanksgiving. We get up, we do our Thursday morning workout, and then after our workout, we each eat a giant quarter of a pie, and we make like a chocolate protein smoothie just because we love the taste of them. And we have a pumpkin pie and a protein shake, and that's been one of our like fun post workout Thanksgiving morning traditions. And what's nice is for me personally, the pie is my favorite part of Thanksgiving. So then I just go ahead and have the Thanksgiving meals, and I just have them as meals. I enjoy them; they're great, they're delicious. But I really got to enjoy the pie, which is my big thing. So that's just an example of making something your own, putting it on an appropriate pedestal, getting excited. We don't need to guilt and shame and piss all over good stuff. We're allowed to enjoy the good things, but the key is to get clear on what that thing is that you're going to enjoy so that you can say emphatically yes to the thing that you want to enjoy. And like I said, I guarantee you'll find that you pass on the stuff that doesn't matter. One of the things that kind of goes along with this that I like to point out is the difference between making room and saving room. And it seems like a subtle difference, and I hope you guys can start to see this. How many of you or someone you know get done Thanksgiving dinner and you go, "Oh, that was so good. I'm so full. I don't think I can have dessert right now. I'm gonna have to make some room." And then 2 3 hours go by, you digest, on the couch laying like this probably, um, and then you finally have enough room and then you eat the pie. That's food on top of food, right? That is a very normal thing. Most people have done that or have family members that do it. What's supposed to happen is you're supposed to save room for it, which is to say that if the dessert is an important part of the meal for you, it's supposed to be a part of the meal, not in addition to the meal, right? It's a part of that meal. And so, one of the ways that I like to hack the idea of saving room is my pumpkin pie is my breakfast that day. And it's because I want to have a nice plate at Thanksgiving. I want to have the spread. I have the things I say yes to. I have the things I'm not extremely excited about, so I pass. But for me, making room, right, or I said incorrectly, saving room is, oh, it's a part of my breakfast, pumpkin pie and protein shake. It's built into my day. It's a part of my overarching. Why does this matter? Well, when I enjoy my pumpkin pie and protein shakes, and then we have our Thanksgiving meal, and I usually am cooking, and so it's a little bit more the lighter meal because I'm just kind of in that do mode. All the Thanksgiving chefs out there probably know what I mean when I say that. You're just not quite as hungry when you're cooking it. So I'll have a plate of it, a little bit of everything. And then that evening, I'll have a dinner. And what ends up happening is I get to eat everything. I get to enjoy everything. I love the taste of all of it, but I don't feel stuffed and I don't feel overwhelmed and I don't feel sluggish and sleepy. I actually have a really nice, blended, balanced day. And it feels fantastic. And so that's just something to think about. Make it your own, figure out your own way to do it. But at the end of the day, the idea of making room versus saving room, the key goes back to the highlight reel. If you have good clarity about what you love and what you look forward to this time of year, but then in that day, it'll be much easier to save room. I call this the plight of the of the dinner roll, right? It's like Thanksgiving, everyone's getting together, you're getting your plate, and then you're getting your silverware. This happens at weddings too, right? You grab your plate, you're waiting in line at the buffet, and then the first things are always the dinner rolls and the salad. And so everyone, because they're just so excited to grab something, um, you grab the dinner roll and you place the dinner roll on the plate, right? And then you grab the next thing you like and the next thing you like, and you work your way down. And by the time you get to the very end, there's always that thing you love, and you have no room left on your plate. And what's really funny is by the time you look back down, you go, I would have much rather had that than this or that this. That I always say what happens is the dinner roll gets flicked off the side of the plate so that you can make room, right, for that thing that you actually want to eat. And so something to think about is Thanksgiving is meant to be about enjoying favorite foods and shared camaraderie with friends and family. Get clear on the things you're really excited about, right? You don't have to eat a little bit of everything. Some people, that is their thing. Some people love what they call the sampler plate, a little bit of everything. But most people, what I've found over the years, love specific things. And so the idea is, for example, for me, this is going to be controversial, but I'm giving you personal thoughts and personal experiences. Mashed potatoes is kind of something I can have anytime. I'm not a huge like Thanksgiving mashed potato guy. I do not eat stuffing any other time than Thanksgiving. And so for me personally, I'm going to have double stuffing and I'm going to skip the mashed potatoes. Might be a controversial swap. That's my plate, not yours. Worry about your plate. But it's to say that you can make similar swaps. Get clear on the things you like. Give yourself extra helpings of them because most of us make the big plate of everything because we feel compelled to eat everything because we don't want to offend anybody. And then what do? You go back to get seconds of the stuff you loved. And that seconds plate is usually way more than you needed. You're already full, but you just didn't get enough of the things you loved. Well, if you had passed on some of the stuff that wasn't super exciting and doubled down on the stuff you were amped about, guess what that plate is? It's satisfying. It's enjoyable. It is your plate. The United States does buffets differently than the rest of the world. For those of you who have traveled, you can attest to this. In the US, buffets are permission to have a little of everything. Everywhere else, buffets are how they make sure everyone has something, right? And so when you're in the US, everyone grabs a little bit of everything. When you're in Europe, or if you're in Asia, or if you're in Africa, um, people walk up and grab sections of buffets because they're making that version. A buffet is basically 6 meals that are options, and you get to pick one. And it's funny when you actually think about like the wedding buffet where they always have the pasta and the steak and the chicken. You start to realize real quick, like, wait a second, these are 3 distinct meals, aren't they? There's a vegetarian dish, there's a red meat dish, and there's a white meat dish. Everyone always grabs all 3. They're actually meant to be individual meals, but we go down the line and we just slop it on. So something to think about is this is a fun opportunity to get very clear about the things you're most excited about. Build your plate in your image and let that be an awesome and exciting thing. You'll find that you're more satisfied. And once again, when you say an emphatic yes to the things you love this time of year, you'll find it so much easier pass and say no to the things that you're not as interested in. And so we've got a couple things there that I want to kind of just sort of make sure we zoom out with. I gave you the examples of Thanksgiving and how we can pay attention to Thanksgiving not blurring and becoming a week, but can be a fun day that is its own unique exception. It's made even more fun if you get clear on the things you're very excited about. And then we move on and get back to normal portions and use leftovers as strategic meal prep is a great way to think about things. We can also hear when we get clear about the foods that we're saying yes to, right? Or we enjoy our plate more, which makes it easier to pass on things going forward. That tends to become more and more important as the holiday season goes forward. So beyond just Thanksgiving, what I would challenge each of you to do is sometime in the next few days, envision your highlight reel, not just for Thanksgiving, but for the whole entire 5 or 6 weeks. What are your favorite things? For me, absolutely, without question, it is the great grandma's pumpkin pies. It is my mother in law's peanut butter blossoms, and it is my grandmother's red velvet cake. Those are my 3. Those are the ones I know I'm going to love. And I know they're coming. I know I'm amped about them. I know when they're happening. And so as a result, that is in my mind. And what's really cool is because I didn't say, oh, I love pie or oh, I love cake. I'm not going to say yes to every pie and every cake, just like we talked about with the cookies. If you get clear on the things you're most excited about, you'll find it much easier to actually find those things, look forward to those things. What we've effectively done is we've diminished that blur. So now you just have 7 special occasions and they're fun and they're special and you know why they're special and you put them on a pedestal. You've gotten real excited about them and you enjoy the heck out of them. And then you get to have just normal days afterwards. And so instead of that accumulating spillover and fatigue, you end up with genuine enjoyment. I'll never forget one of the first times I challenged one of my sweet loving clients to this notion, right? If any of you out there are thinking, well, like I'm just a sweets person, right? So like I love all of them and I can eat all of them. what I'll note is that one, most of the reason that people are burnt out at the end of this season is because they say yes to a whole bunch of exceptions that they're not particularly ecstatic about, and it just builds up and really creates fatigue and throws their body off and throws sleep off and all of that. I blame the New Year's resolution and as a result, Planet Fitness's entire existence on the holiday slugfest. People feel so thrown off that they're like, I need to go on a diet. And it's like, well, not necessarily. It sounds like you just said yes to everything unconditionally, and didn't even enjoy it that much, which is the worst part. But it's to note that when we think about some of our favorite things, and that's what I wanted. I lost my train of thought. I had a client one time, and I asked her what one of her favorite desserts was because she swore that I could just eat desserts all the time. She told me what her favorite dessert was. And I said, okay, I want you to pack 2 servings of it every day for lunch for the next 2 weeks. She was like, what? What do you mean? I was like, I want you to see that it's really not that you're just this like insatiable sweets eater, that there's an upper limit to your sweets loving. And I was like, it's only 2 weeks. It's not going to be the end of the world, right? And what was so funny was I got the play-by-play daily. Um, First day, ate both. Second day, ate both. Third day, ate one. Fourth day, ate one. Fifth day, took them for a walk, right? Packed them, brought them home. And it was the first time she had passed on those desserts before. And she went, oh my gosh, I said no to dessert. Exactly. Novel, special things are only special if they're actually novel. If they exist all the time, they're not special. If you eat cookies every day in December, they're probably not as special, right? As then if you have them for the actual special occasion. If you're eating the random cookies in the break room, it actually makes the cookies you're excited about less exciting. And so it's just something to think about. I joked about this in my post earlier today, but it's the idea that like real foodies are kind of snobs about it, right? They kind of put their things on the pedestal. Like, that's not my peanut butter blossom that I love. That's not my pie. That's not this, we can think about other things that we tend to get that way about when we're really well informed on something. It's like, oh, I really like this, right? It's like the Starbucks snobs that will only drink Starbucks coffee and all that good stuff too. Sometimes it's not a bad thing to have high expectations about exceptions. If your expectations for your exceptions are high, they're going to be worthwhile. You're going to actually get the bang for your buck. You're going to get the value from them. You're going to get the uniqueness from them, and they're going to actually be restorative. And then boom, we get to bounce back, get back to regular routine for those 28 out of 35. And when you do that, you'll start to just feel like you, because most people don't realize this unless they're working with a dietitian. You probably have a weekly exception pretty much the rest of the year. Most of us do, right? And so when you realize that there's 7 days in the next 35 days that are exceptions, that's really not that much more dramatic. It's not that big of an uptick. What happens is the blur is really what gets people. So I wanted to dig into those key things. There's one more sort of piece that I want to double back on and then focus on, and it's called the importance of piles. Something that I alluded to with the idea of making room versus saving room, and also I kind of alluded to when I talked about the cookies, is that it's oftentimes not what we're eating, but how we're eating it. And so something that's really interesting to see is really the word dessert first is from the French word desservir, and the French word desservir loosely translates to clear the table is what it means. It's a verb for to clear the table. So it's meant to end a meal. And the idea is when you eat a full meal, it has salty and creamy and savory and all those other flavors, and then you end it with something sweet. It creates a concept called umami, which is this flavor explosion in your brain. Fireworks go off, you get extremely satisfied, and it makes the meal really, really fulfilling. That is, if you've ever enjoyed a multi-course meal that was done really well, the entire point of that process. Dessert is meant to be at the end of a meal. What ends up happening as a natural side effect of that dessert is sugar doesn't close the bottom of the stomach. And so we don't really digest sugar in our stomach. We digest it in our mouth. It'll break down in the stomach, don't get me wrong, but we don't need our stomach to digest sugar. It's ready to go. It absorbs in the intestines. And so when we eat sugar, it kind of goes straight through, right? And it just hits our bloodstream. We get a spike and a crash. That spike and a crash tends to lead to more of a desire for sugar because we're trying to get back up. And it becomes this really weird game of tug of war with our energy. When you eat a meal that has proteins and fats and fibers and all those other things and add the sugar to it, that meal closes the bottom of the stomach and it melts all the food together and creates what's called chyme. And then that slowly leaves the stomach over the course of 3 hours. So instead of getting this massive blood sugar spike that inevitably crashes, we get a nice steady drip of energy. And so the cravings don't happen. The enjoyment of the food absolutely still takes place. The cookie is still absolutely delicious. But what ends up happening is you don't need as many of them because it's at the end of a meal, so you're already full. You're not eating those cookies to feel full. You're eating them to top off the fullness for an experience. But then you also don't get the spike and crash, which means you don't feel the need to go back. You stay full until your next pile. And so one of the things I like to encourage people to think about during this time of year is to pay attention to their piles. If you find yourself munching and grazing constantly throughout the day, you're probably going to notice volatile energy levels. You'll probably notice upset stomach periodically. You might notice erratic bowel movements and all those types of things. But it's also to say you might find yourself eating and saying yes to more and more of sort of the accessible sweets and treats that are around. And once again, you're not actually enjoying them. You're just kind of grabbing them. They become increasingly mindless. If we instead connect them to piles, right? If we save room instead of make room, those piles will allow us to feel a lot more satisfied, a lot more fulfilled. And you'll find that the entire experience is much more rejuvenating, which is really what this comes back to. And so I don't care if you're somebody that is currently trying to lose weight or somebody that has a really negative relationship with food and is trying to feel less nervous about dealing with the food, or maybe both of those things. One of the things we want to think about is we shouldn't be saying this or that when it comes to food. We shouldn't be sort of blaming specific foods or fearing specific foods or saying I can't have things. We should be asking, well, how do I want to incorporate this? How do I want to put it in play? And make a game of it. Have fun with it, right? Find a way that is enjoyable to you. Find a way that is energizing to you. Find a way that feels good to your body. There is absolutely some subjectivity there. And that's why I explained my Thanksgiving day, right? That works for me. It's delicious. It feels good. I enjoy it. It's been a fun scenario for me. There's nothing restrictive about that holiday experience for me. It's a great thing. It's an emphatic yes, but it doesn't set me up to be drained and lethargic and bloated and all of those things. Same thing with all these highlight reels. And so I was going to challenge each of you to one thing. It would be to get that highlight reel, get clear on the things you're most excited about, the things you want to say yes to, because what you'll find is that if you identify when they're happening and what they are, it's going to allow you to then go, okay, well, how do I want to incorporate them? And if you make these little tweaks over this holiday season, you'll find that you feel more excited about the positive things and you don't have the drain that comes in between. So you actually come out of this holiday season not feeling so spent. So I'm going to pause there. I want to make sure I give time for questions. Those were some of the key kind of focuses. I want to be a brain to pick for anyone that wants to troubleshoot and chat. And so I will actually pause right now. And if anybody wants to, is there an easy hand raising? Well, why don't we use the chat, actually? I can even get on here because I know there was an initial question. Very good. Okay. Yeah. So if anyone wants to either unmute themselves and they're, more than welcome to ask a question, or if anyone wants to type in the chat, if they'd be more comfortable, happy to answer there.
Hi, this is Nancy. I'm sorry I muted myself because I'm walking my dog, so I can't type while I'm walking.
That is fine. Absolutely. Unmute. That is no problem. I can hear you well. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. My question is, I purposely worked on Thanksgiving to avoid overeating on Thanksgiving because I have a horrible relationship with food. And I will say through your organization, I'm getting a lot better with it. But But I am looking forward to my leftovers. I like them way better than I do the original meal anyway. So it's like not really a true sacrifice. But I don't know. My highlight reel would include the stuffing and the sweet potatoes. So if I'm going to make meals with this leftovers, I really don't know the concept of what amount of starch I should have, because I'm going to want both a piece of sweet potato and stuffing. Would it be like a half a cup total? I just don't know how to make that. I don't know that
Yeah.
yet.
That's a great question. You haven't gotten there yet, and that's okay. That's lots of good stuff to learn. But this is a great example of something where it sounds like the holiday itself got really sort of torn and thrown and complicated emotionally. And so you having the ability to have the leftovers sounds to me like a really good kind of what we'll call controlled exposure back into it. And the hope is that this year you'll be able to do some positive things, and that'll lead to a better relationship with it in future years. But to answer that question, yeah, one of the things we'll look at is on the actual first meal, the actual what you're going to call your Thanksgiving meal, your exception meal. Just serve and enjoy. Don't worry about measures, right? That one meal is not meant to be this micromanaged situation. When we're then going to the leftovers, to your point, I mentioned before that stuffing and turkey and green beans is just chicken, rice, and broccoli. Well, you can absolutely split that carb down the middle and have half and half if you'd like. When it comes to things like your sweet potatoes and those types of things, a serving is going to be about a cup roughly. And so one of the things that you could do is you would do a half a cup of each. That would be the most sort of easy to access portion. And again, some people might need to do a little more. Some people might need to do a little bit less. That is where if you're working with one of the RDs, they may be able to kind of give you an idea, or if you have some sort of meal guidance that you're doing. For example, if you have a meal plan that says for dinner have 4 ounces of protein, 1 cup of starch, and 1 cup of vegetables, just as an example, then that cup of starch, you would do a half cup and a half cup. And then you'd have the veggies with it sort of as that addition. And so if you have sort of some sort of meal guidance or reference that you usually use, and if you don't, what I'll note out loud is you may be in a place now where you have a general idea of how much you would currently eat of that starch. Say it was pasta, or say it was rice, or say it was potato non-holiday. That serving, yeah, split it in half and turn it into part sweet potato and part stuffing, or whatever the two that you love are. The other option, 1 full serving for lunch, 1 full serving for dinner. And what's nice is you've got plenty of leftovers that you might be able to do that for a few days and decide which one you like the most, right? Sometimes a sweet potato only meal is going to be, that flavor is going to hit a little bit better for you, and you might find that you want a bit more of it. And that's where you absolutely get some say in this. So make it yours. But I would give you that reference if it's not a bad thing to use a cup as a reference. And then if you want additional clarity, definitely reach out to your RD that knows a bit more about your case.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone else have questions? Like I said, I'm an open book and a brain to pick.
I got one if it's okay. I mean, as
absolutely, sir.
Yeah, I get invited to a couple of the Friendsgiving things, right? That's what we tend to do, and I'm always curious about, like, it's difficult for me to decide what to bring, right? Like, what's a dish to bring along for people to share in, but is also like accessible for everybody and isn't one of those sort of. I always find that you bring massively heavy dips or something like that, something to do, but I'm looking for like ideas that something a little bit more. I don't know. I want to say I don't use the word healthy, fun but good. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So one of the things I'll say out loud is what I challenge any clients that I like kind of recipe brainstorm with, is it's the reflection that Thanksgiving is about coming together and sharing. And so the first thing is there any sort of family recipe or nostalgic food that you enjoy? Because if so, that's got to be the base of whatever it is. And then you and I can take that and make it whatever, right? And so it's kind of fun. You could turn it into something real heavy. You could turn it into something really light. So for example, say I'll give you a fun example. My dad makes an oyster dressing. So I grew up in Baltimore. It's a little known fact. I lived in Baltimore until I was 12, and he always makes an oyster stuffing. And so oyster stuffing is like kind of a personal holiday tradition for me, right? So say that was something I really loved. I might make oyster stuffing muffins instead of like the big pile, right? Turn it into these little singular portable scenarios. Or I might say, you know what, oysters not a likely big sell in Pittsburgh, just as an example. So I'm going to make a slightly different version or alternative. Maybe I'll make a a shrimp one or a lobster one or something like that. Or, oh, we don't want to go shellfish allergy. It's to say that you can have a whole bunch of fun, but getting clear on the first thing would be try and tie it to something that you love or is nostalgic to you, because that's where everyone's supposed to bring something that's from their personal experiences. So I guess as an open-ended question, is there anything that comes to mind for you that says Thanksgiving to you?
It does. I mean, like being British, as people can tell from the accent, it's an interesting day for me to celebrate, but I do enjoy contributing. But I think something that I've found I've done in the past and quite like to do is like mini beef Wellingtons, right? You get a little mini.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant.
A bit of horseradish and a bit of beef in there, and you can also do a change for that for someone that wants something that's vegetarian. You can do a version for that too, like a bean casserole version.
Yeah.
That's what I've done in the past. Make some popovers and put some beef in there with some horseradish.
See, that's a perfect example, right? It's something that's from your culture. You're bringing something to the group that is uniquely you, and I think that's the most important part of a Thanksgiving tradition, right? It's even when we think back to the whole, view of the Pilgrims meeting, the Indians and the Pilgrims were bringing the things that they had, right? And so the first Thanksgiving meal in theory, right, was people share. It was a sharing of cultures, right, which is kind of cool. So I love the beef Wellington. The thing that pops in my head for you is definitely, I was going to say, some sort of puff pastry based thing. It could be little mini pot pies or something like that.
Yeah, you know it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I've been across the pond a couple times, but those are the types of things that absolutely sit really well, and they're fun and they're enjoyable. And again, I love the idea of making like individuals, like you said, little mini individual beef Wellingtons. That's a perfect idea. It's so funny when what ends up happening is, and I understand the intention. Our culture, we definitely got into this place where how do I want to say this? Everyone started to try and bring a fruit or a vegetable because there was a massive absence of fruits and vegetables. But what's ended up happening is now, if we're not careful, you go to a party that's meant to be really fun, nostalgic family dishes, and it's like Giant Eagle veggie trays and Whole Foods fruit salads. And you're just like, okay, cool, but like, where's the actual culture? And that's why I brought up today the idea of the exception mindset, is to embrace the fact that we don't need that day to be this like veggie tray, fruit tray situation. Let it be beef Wellington next to candied yams, next to some sort of pie, and next to some sort of fun mac and cheese or cornbread or whatever it is. And then let's get back to normal food the next day, right? If we let it be the exception, I think we spend too much time, even when I talk with clients in a non-holiday format, I always say 300 out of 365, right? 300 days a year, let's let them be routine, let's let them be intentional, let's let them have some sort of rhythm, let them have exercise or movement, let them have vegetables and produce. The other 65 are allowed to be days. And whether it's a Thanksgiving or an anniversary, or you're sick or you're on vacation, or there's a loss of a loved one, whatever those 65 days are made of, they're allowed to just be days, right? If that's roughly 80% by quick math, and if you did 80%, if you were a sports team, you'd be in the championship of whatever respective sport you were playing, right? That's always a winning record. So that's definitely one of the things I always like to call out too, is save the veggie trays for the more common get-togethers. Let's let something be something like Thanksgiving, let it truly be special.
So I kind of have a question, and I'm kind of doing this on sort of the opposite side of what I feel like is the so-called normal, right? So
Yeah.
I have a very small family, and ever since my grandparents passed away, like it's just pretty much my dad and I, and then like my mom and I will do something, a week or two later, maybe closer to my birthday, because I'm beginning of December birthday, December 6th.
Yeah.
So
Woo-hoo!
Anyhow, my dad's not a really big turkey person, right? And so we'll just kind of end up cooking whatever, which is fine. But I also like really miss that sense of having some sort of like tradition, the traditional family like Thanksgiving meal. And so I guess I'm just curious to get your input on like how can I sort of create that for myself, I guess, without having to like that's so much food, or like how can I find like smaller versions of that, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say there's a couple things that we could do here. There are restaurants that do Thanksgiving meals, and you can just do a takeout one. Like, I mean, I'll say that's the easiest one, but
Right.
it's also probably not the most exciting one.
Well, and I really don't. Obviously, like I'm here, I see an idea with you guys, so like I'm all for cooking. Like I really don't mind it.
Oh,
Same.
absolutely. And that's great. And that's why I was going to start easy and then work our way up to fun.
Yeah.
From there, we've got grocery stores that offer all of the things pre-made, and then you can put together your own meal, and that's going to be a little bit fresher and all of that. But if you want to cook it, there's some really fun ones. I just saw on Instagram, and yes, I'm still guilty of seeing and getting inspired by Instagram like everyone else. A girl made a stuffing waffle, and then she spread mashed potatoes on it and a little bit of gravy and a little bit of turkey, and then topped it with cranberry sauce. And it was like this little crispy Thanksgiving waffle. It looked insanely good. And you could do something like that, and you could keep those ingredients in your fridge, and you could put them together and make your little waffle press, and that could be a fun little portable, like kind of unique lunch. And what's cool is it's not something you're going to do year round, which is the whole effing point, right? It's meant to be this kind of unique thing. And so that's what I would say is look for some like fun little creative thing. One of the ones that pops in my head, I am a burrito lover.
Oh yeah.
I enjoy the Gobblerito from Mad Mex. Shout out to Mad Mex for inspiring that. But I definitely make it better at home because they put way too much mashed potatoes in it for my taste. My ratio is different than their ratio. Their chef is a brilliant man. I know him. But it's just to say that, you know what, palates are different. And so, like, you could even make a Thanksgiving burrito. Or make them like, you know, the, not empanadas. What am I trying to say? They're not burrito. No, not quesadillas. You put them all in a dish and you make like, oh, I'm blanking. Anyway, it's to say that they're basically mini burritos. Enchiladas. Thank you. I'm from the back. Say it louder. I love it. Thank you. Enchiladas, right? You could make Thanksgiving enchiladas. These are just examples of fun things you could do. And what's so cool is when you do a unique thing like that, it becomes a tradition.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say too. Is like being able to find what works for you, and that's been definitely a huge component of like every aspect, not just like meals, but mental and emotional stuff too, obviously. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question and a fun one. And again, I wish you luck on finding something and making it yours. But there's definitely, like you said, some opportunities to really make this unique.
Yeah, I'll have to tag you. I'll have to tag y'all whenever I figure it out. And for the day,
I was going to say, if you get a foodie post, I want to see it. I want tagged in it. Pittsburgh Dietitian on Instagram. So
I got you. Don't worry.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. Wonderful. Well, we are at the 8 o'clock mark. It's almost like I've done this enough to know when an hour hits. This is fantastic. I wanted to thank all of you again for taking the time to join in. I hope that there were some fun perspectives. We will be, like I said, this was recorded, so we will be posting this on social media. It's going to end up on YouTube, so we'll be able to, you'll be able to rewatch or share with friends or family. Once again, Devin in the chat posted the link to our Give Butter for the Chronic Disease Health Alliance. If you're able to, we would love any amount you can offer to join us in spreading the health and giving back to those that don't have access to care like some of us are so fortunate to have. Any sharing amongst your social media that you can do, whether it's this video, sharing with a friend or family, or sharing our Give Butter means the world to us. I hope all of you have a wonderful holiday season. And until next time, be well.
Thank you.